Okay, here we go. Sorry. So thanks for being here. The purpose of this meeting is really to convene our landlord community to provide an update, share best practices, and really start organizing around providing housing for new Vermonters, really of all different backgrounds. My name's Alex Beck. I work for the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. I'm the Welcoming Communities Program Manager. My role in this work is really looking at the region and how is our region and the infrastructure around employment, around housing and transportation, those bigger picture topics. What are we doing and what resources do we have as a region, as a community to support new Vermont populations, existing Vermont workers, really all of the above. But of course, today is predominantly focused on new Vermonters, new Americans, refugees, asylum seekers, and parolees. And we'll get into the specifics of this a little bit in a sec. If anyone has any questions as we go, feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself. And we will get started with a short presentation. So let me share my screen. So I won't take for granted the fact that most folks know, but some may not know, that Brattleboro was recently established as a refugee resettlement community. And what that means is that there's an organization, the Ethiopian Community Development Council. We have representatives from those organizations here today, have been able to open an office here in Brattleboro to support a number of different programs that revolve around new Vermonters. And I'll get into some of the specifics of that. And there'll be an opportunity for folks from all of our support organizations to introduce themselves in just a minute. The update, is really, I wanted to start with some of the big picture information that is both important to understand in some regards, and as a landlord, may not be very important explicitly as it relates to your role in supporting these new community members. And first, it's really around the language that you may be hearing when you're working with these folks, when you're interacting with the organizations, and especially when you're hearing the news. I mean, this is a very public it's just, it's been in the news, with the crisis in Afghanistan and the efforts to support those folks can be confusing. The BDCC has been looking at supporting immigration in our community for years now. And the idea of a humanitarian parolee is new to us as well. So I'll just briefly touch base on what, predominantly the three different kinds of statuses. Again, these are federal statuses that are designated for the folks that our organizations are working most directly with. The first is, first I'll share that, what's the same about all of these folks is that they are all seeking refuge in the United States, and that they're all humanitarian, they're all here for humanitarian reasons, and that they're fleeing, persecution, war, or environmental disaster. So regardless of their designation, they are all here seeking refuge and, seeking safe, comfortable, secure housing, communities, and of course, hopefully the opportunity to really prosper here. But again, they are all, equally deserving of our compassion and support, in their search for a safe place to be. That being said, our federal government does differentiate between, how folks come to our country and what their status is. And so that's just important information. I think the easiest way to explain some of this is based on where folks engage the U.S. immigration system first. And so refugees, which folks are probably quite familiar with the concept of, traditional refugees, and I'll use refugees with a capital R, they seek, refugee status from abroad. They are often displaced from their home countries and spend years and years in a refugee camp. They work with the UN, the global organization that supports refugees and humanitarian, folks impacted due to humanitarian crises. And it's that organization that works with our State Department and the other refugee related organizations. There are many, the International Organization for Migrants. There's a number of different organizations globally that play a role in processing, in vetting, in understanding who these folks are and where they're coming from, what their needs are. And then at the, they work with the State Department, they work with Homeland Security. And then once approved, it's arranged for these refugees to leave the camps or wherever they currently are and to be resettled by an organization like the Ethiopian Community Development Council. And I will introduce those folks in that organization in a second. So that's the most traditional refugee resettlement that it's happened in Brattleboro in the past, in the 70s and 80s with the Laotian community. And that is, what folks are most familiar with. The humanitarian parolees is admittedly a terrible name to describe what the Afghan evacuees, their status is. And so this is where, because of the crisis and the speed of that crisis, these folks were able to leave Afghanistan. They arrived in the United States, and they've been in on bases in U.S. custody, essentially, where all of that vetting and that background work, the processing of work permits, all of that work started in the United States upon arrival after the evacuation. That's not as much time as folks have spent in refugee camps, for instance. And so while these humanitarian parolees are Afghan, community members, they have access to a lot of the same benefits and support as refugees do. But they are still, I'd say, 3/4 or halfway through the immigration process in terms of permanent residency. Whereas refugees are a bit farther along because of the time they've spent abroad first. Lastly, we have asylees, or folks who are seeking asylum. And in many cases, their first engagement with the immigration system in the United States is from within the United States or at the border. And this means a few things. One, it's that there's a bit of a time difference and a lag in terms of how quickly these folks have access to things like work permits and other benefits. They don't receive as much support as an incoming refugee or parolee does. And so they require, in some ways, more resources and support, stronger organizations to support them. This is a longer process, but I think what's unique to Brattleboro and what makes us lucky as a region is, in fact, that we have many asylum seekers in our community already. We've got an organization, CASP, who I'll introduce in just a moment, supporting these folks already. So even though it's a population that is in times more difficult to serve because of the resources made available to them, Brattleboro already has a history of supporting these folks well. And as I'll mention later, some of the landlords may already be renting to asylum seekers. Questions on that? Great, I'll move on. So I'll take the opportunity now to introduce my colleagues from the Ethiopian Community Development Council. As I mentioned, this is they're a refugee organization, and it's most similar to, and it is exactly what, we think of in traditional refugee resettlement. I believe there's only 9 organizations in the country that are, that partner with the State Department to do this work. And so we're lucky that ECDC picked Brattleboro to open up a new office to do this work. And so we have Joe and Thomas on the line. If either or both of you just want to give a quick introduction to you and your work.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Alex, for organizing this. We know from ECDC that landlords are critical partner in this in the resettlement of refugees. I don't know how many minutes I have because I wanted to give some updates after introducing Thomas. So I want to know how many minutes I have.
I think as much time as you need. A lot of this time is structured for questions. So if you just, brief overview.
All right. So before I give some update, I want to introduce Thomas. Thomas is our new hire, co-sponsorship manager. So Thomas will be working with groups that we organize, group of 7 to 10. They will provide some of the core services like housing. So they will reach out to you, the landlords. If you have any issue with, somebody that you are renting to, Thomas will be the person to call. So before I go into the updates, I just want to give Thomas the space to introduce himself, then I can give some updates as to where we are.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Thomas Adelson, a newcomer myself to Brattleboro. I have been working for 15 years in Europe, where the refugee welcome movement of ordinary people and landlords have been able to offer safety to so many. In the US, this whole idea of having the whole community get involved is a new one, and that's what my work is really going to be with co-sponsorship. That means I will be working with local civic groups and religious groups to make sure that that newcomer refugees actually have several people in the community who are helping them get oriented and get extra support. So yes, looking for an apartment and figuring out how they have to deal with the landlord, but also, addressing any other kinds of questions. That will be this whole community that will be answering any kinds of questions that a refugee might have, and being their friend and helping them to discover why it's so wonderful to live in Vermont. So if you know anyone who is interested in joining one of these co-sponsorship groups because they have any different types of talents, let me know and I'll be happy to connect them.
All right, so thank you. We sent out invitation to some of you. Some of you may have received that invitation for Tuesday update. So if you did receive that invitation, then from this update, you may not want to come for the next, the Tuesday meeting. But for those who are not here, some of your colleagues, please spread the word out. They should come for the Tuesday meeting. So the update we want to give you is for a while now we've been discussing about, you have been hearing that refugees parolee will soon be coming through the ECDC program. The office was open on October 29th. Currently we have our office on Putney Road, 112 Harwood Way here in Brattleboro, and the suite is Suite 1. We're hiring staff now. Thomas, I just introduced, is one of the staff. Where we are with refugees, and I want to bring out to the landlords on this, please, we are reaching out to landlords, and if your colleagues are not here, please spread the word out to them. We are critically looking for housing. Our projection for number of refugees that is coming to our area is at 100 individuals. Of the 100 individuals, we don't know how many families, but what we're hearing is the composition of families is between sometimes 4 to 5. but some families go as far as 9 members in one family. Our timeline is December 13th. So December 13th is when we expecting the first family to arrive in Brattleboro. That's our timeline. What that means is we're going to request to our headquarters. They have the people already lined up. We just, because of our staffing, organizing our office, have not requested. But the timeline we have now is December 13th. So we want to make that request. And then they will assign to us refugees from that are already in the system to come to Brattleboro and surrounding areas. What we have seen in recent times, the State Department has a timeline to clear all of the military bases where refugees are. And right now we have over 53,000 refugees in those bases, even though people are living right now. For ECDC alone, we have over 6,000 that are being assigned to us across our 13 networks across the country. We have seen, not only from ECDC, but all of the refugees resettlement agencies, as soon as you started receiving refugees, it means that the process has begun, so then you will start receiving. So of the first arrival on the 13th, we expect once we receive that family, throughout the process, now the weeks after, we will be receiving more families or individuals coming in. We don't know the compositions of the family right now, but we expect some will be families of probably 4, 5, 6, or 9, or some will be just single individuals. So we are asking all of you landlords, some of you have reached out to us that I have this apartment available. Please, if you have a place available, please reach out to us. I'll put my email in the chat box. I also will ask Thomas to put his email in the chat box so you can reach out to any of us if you have a place available. For the move-in costs, we're already in discussion with Vermont Rent, Vermont, what is the VSH, Vermont State Housing Authority, that those that are coming will be able to access the Vermont rental assistance right away. So which means that they will have the first, last month of security deposit as well as a 12 months of rent. And in that process, part of the requirement is for folks to start, to get employment. So the first 3 months to 6 months, people will have to find jobs. And we are so happy to have our partner, the BDCC, in terms of the employment partnership, so that folks would now start working and they will pay rent. And most of the people that are coming from our experience are very, very skilled people. And so we are, we really confident that they will find jobs right away. So paying rent after the Vermont State Authority help on their own is not going to be a problem. So I just want to ensure landlords that, those that are coming will be able to quickly find jobs, to start working, as well as they will have this assistance coming from the state for the VRAP program. So we please want you to reach out to your friends, to your colleagues, to whoever you know, even those who have the Airbnb. If you know someone, please let them reach out to us. We critically need housing. SIT is just a short-term gap. We're trying to use that campus for temporary housing, but we will really, really be happy if we have a landlord who says, I have this apartment, because the first choice is for people to be independent, to be self-sustaining. So we want people to move to housing if there's housing available. I know Windsor Housing, I saw Sue Ross is on the also. I've spoken with Elizabeth, and I think Elizabeth is coming for the briefing on Tuesday. We will continue the conversation, but we want to reach out to all of you. Please, please, please reach out to your friends and send us the listing you may have. I want to pause here for a while, and I will open up for questions at some point when Alice opened the line, but I will be leaving after answering some of your questions because I have another meeting coming up. Thank you, and we look forward to working with you.
Yeah, Thank you so much, Joe and Thomas. Yeah, also I'll reiterate what Joe said is that, we do have the opportunity for some short-term temporary housing at SIT. And so what that means for our landlord partners is that if you have units available today or tomorrow, that would be excellent. But also, if you know that there will be units made available in the next 6 months, that's also an opportunity to think about. Okay, I know that in January, some of my leases are, up for renewal. This is something I'd like to be a part of, and I can open up a unit and have a family who's in temporary housing find long-term housing. So it isn't just a right now, and it isn't just a when you know someone's arriving, is there a unit available? There's also a timeline that we can work collaboratively on and share about that will help you as a landlord provide those opportunities. Any questions? Great. So, if you are going to be renting to a refugee or a humanitarian parolee, the chances are you would most likely work with the ECDC and Joe or Thomas. But as I mentioned, we also have another organization in our community, the Community Asylum Seekers Project, who works with asylum seekers already and is already doing this work and has been in our community for quite some time. So I think I saw Kate on the line if you want to just provide a brief introduction.
Thanks, Alex. Nice to see everybody. For those of you who aren't already familiar with our work, the Community Asylum Seekers Project has been in the area for 5 years now, and we have resettled 20 asylum seekers. We're a small organization, smaller scale, and the asylum process is also, as Alex mentioned, a longer process. But we, when we welcome somebody, an asylum seeker, they generally live with a host family at first until they get working, until they get a work permit and start working full time, at which point they rent apartments like anybody else. We have also rented 3 apartments on behalf of asylum seekers, including 1 through Windsor Housing Trust and 2 through private landlords. And that's always worked very, very well for us. And we're grateful to have those folks to work with. Yeah, so I'm happy to, if there are landlords who are considering engaging in this process, either with an asylum seeker or a refugee or an evacuee, I'm happy to connect folks with other landlords who have done it before, or with, private homeowners who have hosted people in their homes to know more about what that experience is like.
Great. Thank you, Kate. And this is also the other staff member at CASP. This is Dora. I have the great pleasure of working with Dora on employment work with CASP. And as one of the case managers, Dora may be one of the people, along with Kate and others, who you might end up working with on behalf of a tenant. So what happens next? Joe already provided most of the overview here. And the most important thing is that we're really preparing now to welcome our first families in the middle of December. There will be regular stakeholder meetings of service providers, landlords, pretty much everyone involved in this that happen regularly. Our goal, of course, is to scale up our ability as a community to support as many folks as possible, but it will happen at the pace that we can find safe, secure housing and support for these individuals. So the last, part of this, short webinar is really focusing on some expectations and some best practices that we've heard repeated numerous places, both in Vermont, in Chittenden County, where they have a refugee resettlement office already, and also across the country, where we've, been long participating in webinars and research presentations on how best to support new Vermonters. There are actually some reasons why new Vermonters are really excellent tenants. I'll start with my last point, and it's something that we've already seen demonstrated, is that these folks have a number of support people to help. And that the shared goal here is for them to feel safe and comfortable and successful in long-term housing. And part of that is making sure their relationships with their landlords are great. And so, we are all as a team, Kate and Joe and Thomas and these co-sponsorship teams are committed to making it work. And that means working collaboratively and supporting landlords as well. The other thing is that a reminder that these folks have been pretty thoroughly vetted, and with regards to background checks by a trusted third party, which is, our federal government and Department of Homeland Security. Joe mentioned that, folks who are of working age are required to find work within the first 90 days of arrival. That's something that we're prepared to support everyone in finding. And there are a lot of good high wage jobs that can support, a family renting, a unit readily available at a moment's notice, really. We've had a long workforce shortage here in our region, but that means that wages are high for entry-level jobs that folks, that there are a lot of vacancies for. And again, it's not just support around communication and partnership building and making sure everyone feels comfortable and safe, but there is, of course, financial resources available to these individuals, whether it's through their co-sponsorship groups or through existing organizations and programs that can help, whether it's make rent on time or better understand tenant rights, or landlord rights, help bridge any intercultural, differences there might be back in someone's home country. If you're renting from someone, you can paint walls without asking, is that something that you as a landlord don't want? Those are things we can talk about. And there's ways to make sure that if there is a miscommunication or a barrier, that it's solved. Or ways to make sure that it doesn't happen in the first place. And so these again are really big things, and they're important things to remember about this population. And again, these are individuals seeking refuge. They are seeking peace and stability and safety. And so it's statistically, we know it's true, but also it's proven itself time and time again that, immigrants and new Vermonters are exceptionally less likely to commit any crimes, to jeopardize their ability to stay in a safe and secure place. And so that is, of course, something that's important when thinking about as a landlord and as tenants, that these folks are, their utmost goal is to be safe, secure, and comfortable and part of this community. And so that being said, they're also, they do not, they are not traditional Vermont renters in the way that you've most likely experienced. And so there are things that you can do as a landlord if you're really looking to support these folks, that you can do, that we've seen are best practices that have been successful elsewhere. The first one is consider waiving a credit and a background check. So the first point is that many of these folks won't have any credit. And so running a credit check doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that they aren't capable of earning a good wage or that they aren't reliable. They just probably don't have a credit history that's available to you. The second part is a background check. It's something we see a lot in employment background checks. We've seen that the access to the information that you would normally get from a United States, data center or background check system is either more complicated or more expensive, or just that information isn't collected in someone's home country. It's worth saying folks don't arrive into our community unless they've already received a background check and have, had that criminal history done already. And so it's not, I'm not suggesting you waive a background check because you should just inherently trust everyone who's applying. It's that these checks have been done already, and it's part and parcel with arriving in our community. There's been a lot of talking in conversation in Brattleboro about how much upfront rent is required and legally allowed to collect. And this is something also that a new arrival will likely not be able to do as well. And that is really looking at that first month's rent along with the security deposit and that longer term investment is that, maybe that's something you don't need to waive entirely, but maybe it's something, a cost that you can spread out throughout the course of a year lease, so that you can still have that security deposit. If, someone paints the walls or puts holes in the walls, it's stuff that, happens in all landlords, in all apartments. Someone hangs too many photos or pictures, and sometimes you need that security deposit to be kept to do work. I wouldn't, say that you need to waive the collection of that or the development of it, but maybe there's a more creative way to collect it or to build that up rather than asking it for it immediately, and postponing the amount of time or the increase in the cost for someone to initially settle in that housing. Alongside all of this, nitty gritty stuff, in some ways, there's a lot of the softer things or, more community or communication based things that you can do to help avoid any miscommunication or reassure folks about how to do things here in Brattleboro. My neighbor who moved from Chestnut Street in Brattleboro to Chapin Street now, where I am, is still trying to figure out what days are garbage days. And this is someone who's lived in Brattleboro for years, native English speaker. And so, he still misses garbage day every other week, because he's still getting used to it. So it's these little things that you can also think about, working with local partners, whether it's the ECDC or CASP or the town or the state of Vermont, to help interpret or translate your own materials or, the lead paints, waiver stuff that we are all so familiar with, all of that, stuff around compliance and safety that you're focused on as landlords. Please reach out to any of us, mentioned here, and we're here to help support you finding translation services. The other thing I'll mention is what I've heard throughout in different employers, throughout people doing this work, is Google Translate is pretty good. I think it's, they say it's able to communicate the most important things. It may not be the perfect grammar. It may not perfectly translate the way you want, but if you're in a pinch, the technology you have available on your cell phones is usually good enough. And it's really the intent that goes the furthest, is that if you're both trying to build that relationship and to make sure you're understanding each other to the best you can with what the resources you have, that's what really, creates a really good relationship early on. And again, just remembering that you can contact these case managers and other people, the co-sponsorship teams, to help solve any of these issues, whether it's how to take out the garbage, how the space is being used, whether that in a good way or a bad way, so any of those things. It's, actively engaging with the people who are here to support is really the best way to make sure you have a long-term successful tenant, which is of course the goal for everyone involved here. I want to leave some minutes for any questions from landlords specifically. There are definitely a handful of you on here. Any specific questions you have or general questions you have about this process, I want to just, give some space for that. And then we'll wrap up today's meeting with just an introduction to housing resources that are available to all Vermonters, and especially that you as a landlord might, be interested in using as well. So I'll just open the floor, just give a few seconds for anyone if you're interested in asking any questions. Questions or concerns? And if folks who are either watching this later or don't have any questions right now, you can always send them to us as they come up.
Okay, I'm about to get off. So again, I hope my email appears in the chat. I sent it earlier. So please, again, I want to emphasize that we really, looking up to you, landlords. You are critical partners of this process. Please reach out to us. Thank you so much, and I will see some of you on Tuesday. Thanks, Alice, for organizing this.
Thanks, Joe. Seeing no additional questions, I'm going to just go to our last little bit of the meeting here. We have a number of people who are representing organizations, housing organizations that support both landlords and tenants, have a number of different resources and programs available. And it's important, to mention that after around 90 days, refugees are in more ways than not like your average Vermonter, in terms of what resources they have access to and the kind of supports that that are available to them. Of course, there's going to be language learning support and other kinds of cultural communication support that's available, but longer term, these are community members. And so that existing housing organizations and the resources we have already supporting our community members are as important pieces to this entire system as the two organizations, ECDC and CASP, that we've already mentioned. So I'll read through my list and just, who I can see. I will stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other. And if someone from the Windsor Housing Trust, I know there's at least a few of you on here, would like to just give a quick share about the services that you have that landlords in particular may want to be made aware of.
You want to jump in, Sue?
Sure. So our housing with us, we had in the past typically take applications and do work from a wait list. So I think it's something that we need to discuss, Bob, too, if that's going to be continuing for this process, or if this is something that we're able to kind of jump ahead a little bit with, so that we have to clarify, I think, on our end for right now. We do have single room occupancies, which is in a boarding house type. I don't know if that would work for some folks, again, as a single. We have some upcoming 1-bedroom units available, and possibly 1 or 2 bedrooms. But again, I think at this point we need to clarify what our process is going to be moving forward with this for Wyndham and Windsor.
Yeah, I think Sue's referring to, almost all of our units are low-income housing tax credit units. So there's a lot of regulations involved in renting them. I know we were successful recently in renting one to an asylum seeker. And that situation, an organization guaranteed essentially the first year's rent. It sounds like you have some temporary housing for folks coming over. It may work out where they get jobs and we can provide housing once they have employment. But at any rate, we have quite a few units coming available all the time, but it's just a matter of being able to guarantee that first year's rent and have a 1-year lease.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Tyler, also for putting in the chat. VSHA, the VRAP program is available to help support these folks. Also, if you're, as a landlord, if you're not familiar with VRAP yet, it's a really great way as a landlord to make sure that regardless of who you're renting to, that they have a safe place to live and that you get the compensation that you need to be a landlord. And it's a good program that there's a lot of support available to help everyone access that. So thank you, Tyler, for sharing. I also see Dan. Thanks for joining us. If you want to just give a quick bit of information.
Yeah, sure, Alex. Hi, everyone. My name is Dan Handy. I'm the landlord liaison for the Brattleboro area. My office is at Groundworks Collaborative. The program is funded through the Office of Economic Opportunity and the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. So I work with folks on those VRAP applications you were just talking about. Yeah, I've expressed to Alex that there are a lot of parallels with what we work, what the work we do at Groundworks, where we obviously work with homeless families and individuals, and a lot of similar concerns I could anticipate that you've headed off that we work with, and I'd be happy to help with connecting with landlords if possible.
Great, thanks, Dan. Do we have any other folks who either have resources or programs that may be relevant to landlords in particular? I am going to upload some information on 211, which is it's like a universally accessible support call line, essentially. What's important about that, the person who runs that program locally couldn't be here, but is that this is who you can call in the dead of night. I think 211 is open all the time, and you're likely to get a hold of someone there in the case of an emergency around someone needing financial assistance or something along those lines. So I did put that in the chat as well. Any additional comments or resources? Any questions? There's still plenty of time for questions in general or specific. Hey, Sue.
Hey, Alex. I have a question. I don't know if you know the answer to it, or maybe we can just get some momentum behind it. But I think it was the VHIP program that was in the Senate bill last year that didn't pass, which was the one that gave grants to landlords up to $30,000 for the creation of housing units or bring them back online. It seems that if refugees, asylees, and parolees are eligible for VRAP, that potentially, if this program comes back, that landlords could use this to improve units. Do you know anything about that? Does anybody know?
Go ahead, Dan. Yeah.
Yeah, I may be able to, as far as my understanding, I can share, which is that those units are dedicated to our coordinated entry program, which is for homeless individuals and families who they already have case management. They're already in the program. Essentially, it's a wait list. But that doesn't mean that that conversation, that possibility can't be had. I think it's probably, it goes without saying, I think you've mentioned it, there's obviously a housing shortage all around the region, and that question of even, can it be people, the question has been posed already about that program. Can it be extended beyond coordinated entry? And my understanding is that the answer so far has been no, but again, I don't know if that can change.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll say from a larger perspective, our organization, the BDCC, is participating in all of the different conversations in our community around housing in general. And we just very much believe that the more units for everyone along every income level that we can create, the better. And that, I think that we'd love to see, a lot of investment in workforce housing and middle income housing also. But really anything we can do to add more units in our community will, all ships will rise with that tide. And so that's something that we're keeping an eye on also. Great. Any other questions or comments? Sure.
Just to get back to the date and the number of folks who you're expecting, you said 100 total, but I'm assuming there's a phased in or a sort of a expected number per month or per time period. What's the number you're expecting initially in December by the 13th or so?
So I don't have those numbers explicitly. I don't know, Thomas, if you have any more information on that.
Yeah, I can say that. I mean, we are the ones who decide when we are at a moment of capacity that can bring people in. So the current plan is to welcome a first family as of the week of the 13th of December. And if that's going well, we could start bringing in a family every week. But the office here gets information on potential refugees that could come in. We say yes, we say no. We have information in advance, right, on those individual cases. So we will be able to then know with some prep, although it is pretty quick, what's the family composition? What are any particular needs that would be relevant for housing that family might have, right? So we are the ones who are determining the pace that this is moving along at.
Great. All right. Well, seeing no other questions or comments, I want to thank everyone for coming today. Again, this will be made available online. There will be a lot of conversations now and moving forward about how we organize and how we support these folks. Again, if you know of any available units, you can reach out to Joe or Thomas. Their emails are in the chat. I put them up on the presentation. I'll share out as well. And thanks a lot, and be in touch if you have any units available. Thanks.